book writing takes a certain level of skill, but sometimes you've gotta wonder why writers decided to pair up certain ships. A multiverse presents infinite possibilities, including the Marvel world where Wolverine and Hercules, yep, the Greek god, joined forces to become lovers and prove their commitment by fighting their way out of hell. Literally. So when 10 evil versions of Charles Xavier are born throughout the multiverse, the Extreme X-Men comic series is born, uniting a team of X-Men from a variety of realities on a mission to eliminate them, one by one. Among the team's ranks are Dazzler of Marvel's main 616 universe, a severed Professor X-Head, a black Cyclops from the era of his Earth's American Civil War, and Howlett, a version of Weapon X described as Wolverine meets Teddy Roosevelt, but still Canadian. Together they travel from one alternate reality to the next, evil Xaviers before the doppelgangers can pose a threat to all of existence. Now the team's journey reunites Howlett and an alternate version of Hercules, who have much more history than their Earth 616 counterparts. Now Wolverine, or Howlett, and Hercules stake their claim as one of comics' most interesting couples when they reveal their love story to the rest of the team. Partners in bed and on the battlefield, Hercules and Howlett finally revealed their love after slaying a dangerous beast. But Zeus was furious that another god besides himself was consorting with mortals and banished the two to Tartarus. In Olympus's dungeon and prison for the Titans, the lovers spent the next years fighting thousands of demons and damned souls. Okay, this next relationship isn't exactly heartwarming, it's definitely more on the icky side. To date, one of the most bizarre comic book romances happens to be Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers, and her love affair with her son. So what happens? Okay, let's start. The Avengers team returns from a mission to find that Ms. Marvel has moved in, and suddenly she's 8 months pregnant, even though she's only been absent for a couple of weeks. Now, being the Avengers, they welcomed Carol back, prepared for the birth, even though she didn't seem entirely happy with the whole situation. But with their help, she soon gave birth to a healthy boy. Aww. And then things get weird. Not only does the baby mature incredibly quickly, learning to walk and talk in no time at all, but he quickly reveals to the team that his father was him. Turns out that Ms. Marvel had been abducted by Marcus, the son of longtime enemy Immortus. After spending weeks trying to seduce her, Marcus gave up on the flowers and chocolate and simply used his father's advanced machinery to subtly seduce and impregnate Carol so that she could give birth to his double when she returned to Earth. And to put the final nail on the coffin of all that is reasonable and sane, the Avengers happily wave Ms. Marvel off as she goes to join her son/husband in his own universe. Although Marcus's plan had worked, his presence on Earth was now damaging time and space. Finding herself strangely drawn to her son, Carol was like, yeah, I'll go to his home dimension with them. She would return a few issues later, resentful of her teammates who should have known better than to let her go with a man who already admitted to kidnapping and manipulating her, but yeah. Iron Man has a knack for creating incredibly advanced technology, only for it to later blow up in his face. We all saw what happened in Age of Ultron when Tony Stark's scientific ambitions overshadowed potential dangers from his creations, and in Invincible Iron Man number 30, Iron Man's suit became alive and fell in love with him. Now, when Tony tells his suit he's just not into him like that, the suit kidnaps him, ties him to a tree, and tortures him. Stark intended the suit of armor to be a safety net, but instead, via a series of unpredictable events, it developed sentience and feelings for his creator. Getting access to Stark's brain immediately made the suit take a turn for the worse. Fortunately, the armor's newfound humanity ultimately led it to sacrifice itself to save Stark. Tony was lucky he didn't have another Ultron MCU situation on his hands. Yes, over the years, comic book creators have never been afraid to throw odd stories at Iron Man. Like he's had his suit emerge from his skin, and in early iterations of the character, wore magic boot skates as part of his armor. But this is a whole other level of weird. At one point or another, you gotta wonder how many substances were involved in the making of certain comic book series. The relationship between Cyclops and Jean Grey is one of the most well-known among X-Men readers, but that doesn't mean it hasn't seen its fair share of drama. Case in point, the psychic affair Scott Summers and sometimes hero, sometimes villain Emma Frost shared, well, the former was still with Grey. The pair becomes a physical item after Jean's death, or one of them, and even co-run Xavier's school after the professor resigns. And that doesn't go well, ending up as disastrously messy as their initial hookup years before. And even when Jean Grey does come back, the two couldn't stay out of each other's minds. The entire time that Scott was with Emma, he became more and more militant. Finally, when Scott died, Emma went bad again and used visions of Scott to start a war with the Inhumans, their relationship turning both of them evil at different points. A romance that was doomed from the start included longtime X-Men member Storm and a mutant from an alternate timeline named Forge. The duo first got together in the Uncanny X-Men in the 1980s, and their relationship was built on a lie from the beginning, causing the building of toxic lies to ruin things for them. See, Forge created a weapon for the US government that neutralizes a superhuman's powers, and something that came out of that weapon struck Storm and stripped her of her powers. Forge took her in to help her, they fell in love, but it didn't take long for Storm to learn that Forge made the device, and it destroyed their relationship. Forge even proposed to her before taking it back, not realizing she was actually gonna say yes. Amazing Spider-Man issue 131 is an iconic, if somewhat infamous issue of the Web-Slingers comic book. The issue paid off a growing relationship between May Parker and Otto Octavius. Yeah, the latter of whom had come to know the widow after renting a room from her. And Doc Ock was dead set on walking May down the aisle, though his reasons for doing so had very little to do with matters of the heart. So beforehand, a distant relative of Aunt May's had passed away, leaving her to inherit a nuclear facility of all things. And Doc Ock was like, I'm gonna marry her to get my hands on this. Although his mission would become far more difficult than simply reading off his vows. Along with Spider-Man bursting onto the scene, the crime lord Hammerhead and his goons also interrupted the corrupted nuptials. This led to an action sequence set at the nuclear facility, with Hammerhead's aggression accidentally causing a massive explosion. Spider-Man gets away with Aunt May, who's now fainted, but when she awakens to see herself in a helicopter with the masked menace, she passes out again. Thankfully, this was the end of her star-crossed love with Doc Ock in the mainstream continuity, but the concept did reappear in other stories. One comic that also used the idea was Spider-Man Life Story, which took a look at Peter's life throughout various decades, and at one point, Doc Ock would give up villainy and marry Aunt May, working alongside his new nephew in a scientific capacity. Alright folks, we're talking about Wolverine again. The relationship between Wolverine and Squirrel Girl in the comics is strange, and even by Wolverine standards. It's first hinted at when Emma Frost finds a mental image of Squirrel Girl in Wolverine's mind behind a door marked fantasies. Yeah, that's creepy enough, but then years later the two encounter one another at Avengers Mansion and immediately start acting awkward and generally behave like they hooked up at one point. The worst part of all of this, if you do the math right, it comes out that the point where Wolverine and Squirrel Girl could have gotten together would have been when it might have been illegal to do so. Okay folks, welcome to Earth 807128. 50 years ago, all the villains teamed up against all the heroes and killed them all, minus Wolverine, Hawkeye, Hulk, She-Hulk, and a couple of others. And what did Bruce do? He had a lot of offspring with his cousin, Jen, because she was the only one worthy of bearing his spawn. Yeah, there's not a lot to say about this pairing, because it didn't last long, and I think everybody wants to forget about it. Now, this is only in the Old Man Logan continuity, where Hulk is literally insane. I don't know if it's explicitly said to be non-consensual, but it's also heavily implied to be, which is even more icky. Gwen Stacy was Peter Parker's girlfriend, and was actually seen as a very passionately loyal woman throughout most of the series. Like, they were a dream team, and like, who wouldn't want to date Spider-Man? Heck, the death of Gwen Stacy is one of the most talked about Spider-Man storylines of all time. Second perhaps only to like his origin story. So imagine how fans felt when the Since Past arc in 2004 changed all of that in favor of secret twins, fathered by the Green Goblin with Stacy prior to her death. And those twins then turned into mini assassins hell-bent on whacking Spidey. Adding more fuel to the fire was the revelation that Mary Jane Watson was actually aware of the whole thing and kept Stacy's secret for years after her death. It's just a whole lot of retconning which did need to happen, proving once again that some things are called classic for a reason. And finally for today, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are two of the most popular characters in the Marvel's comics universe. In the world of Ultimate Marvel, the two also dated each other at one point. Okay, sure, so the pair's difficult upbringing was blamed on this bizarre coupling. Having been rejected by his father, Quicksilver sought comfort in the arms of the woman who reminded him most of his dead mother. And hey, yeah, sure, it seems natural that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch would date. They're good looking, they're really close. Oh right, they're close because they're siblings. And once again, everybody else seemed to be entirely unconcerned by this relationship. The only exception was Captain America, but that's just because his old-fashioned 1940s brain couldn't fathom such 21st century concepts. Fortunately, the Wasp was on hand to explain the whole thing to him, because apparently this was all totally acceptable. I really don't have to explain why they are one of the worst comic book couples ever, right? I think there were some creators that actually cited this as one of the reasons why the Ultimate Marvel universe had to be ditched. Oh, and in one of the most disturbing scenes, the couple consummate their love while Wolverine watches from the bushes. And the fact that Wolverine might have been the twins' father in this universe makes that even worse.
Number 10. Donna Troy and Terry Long. Donna Troy was known at this time as Wonder Woman's little sister. She is the hero known as Wonder Girl, who is spun as being an Amazon from Themyscira, like Wonder Woman, but a teenager. Terry and Donna's relationship ended up becoming so serious that the two got married, and he was such a constant when it came to the Titans as a supporting character that even Starfire, Donna's BFF, ended up developing a little crush on him, and he on her, to be honest. That was also pretty creepy. Donna and Terry ended up having a son together before Terry filed for divorce and a restraining order because Donna's superhero lifestyle was too dangerous for him. In the end, he and both his daughter from a previous marriage, oh yeah, he was married and divorced before he ended up with Donna, and he and Donna's son ended up dying in a car crash because, well, probably no one wants us to remember their weird and pretty awful relationship.
Number 9. Black Cat and Wolverine. Wolverine and Black Cat Claws was a 3-parter released in 2010. When Felicia Hardy first met with Wolverine, they were both kidnapped by Kraven the Hunter in order for him to, well, hunt them down on his beautiful tropical island. The ultimate game of manhunt, I'd say. Now, when the issue started, Black Cat and Wolverine weren't really a fan of each other naturally, but when you're running and fighting for your life, emotions will probably be a little tender, a little exposed. But hey, nothing brings two people closer like beating up bad guys to a pulp, or of course, long walks on the beach. Either one's fine. So while it turned out that Kraven was actually a robot the whole time, spoilers, the real villain all along was Arcade and his girlfriend, White Rabbit. Bunch of fun games they're putting on there. They were behind all of this, and in the third part of the story, the cover alone suggests that the pair got much closer than the beginning of the tale. Black Cat steals a helicopter, Wolverine almost gets eaten by a fish, it's pretty tense. Later on, Black Cat admits that Wolverine was growing on her, and then a few days later, on a date, Black Cat also reminds Wolverine that she too can smell pheromones. And then we'll leave the rest up to your imagination.
Number 8. Catwoman and Nightwing. Another one that I'm sure we'd rather forget. For those who aren't aware of this romance, it has definitely been shipped before by people, and the idea of Catwoman and Nightwing together has even made its way into the comics. Albeit it was mostly Selina doing the seducing here and Nightwing kind of just trying to make her stop, but definitely appearing at least a little tempted. I mean, this is Selina Kyle after all, who wouldn't be tempted, you know what I mean? Catwoman did some flirting and kissing with Nightwing while attempting to go after the same diamond that he was looking to protect. In the end, he figured out what she was really looking to do with their little dalliance, making sure that Nightwing decided to kiss and tell, thereby making Batman jealous. What? Selina, ew! This whole thing is pretty gross, and especially as like some sort of weird jealousy bait. Not even just because of Catwoman's motivation in this story, but because Nightwing is like a son to Batman. So that's like Catwoman making out with her own stepson.
Number 7. Supergirl and Comet. Of course I have to talk about the time Supergirl fell in love with her pet horse. Of course. Now before you react, hear me out. It's a sapient horse with magical powers who at one point was actually a centaur in ancient Greece. So, you know, it's not too bad. It's still kind of bad. It's still a little bad. But dare I say it, he was actually quite handsome, I have to admit. He first appeared in Adventure Comics 293, and he became Supergirl's beloved pet, and then in Action Comics issue 301, he became a human being. I wish my dog turned into a human. I'd be like, hey man, what's up with the Q-tips? Why are you eating Q-tips every day? Yuck, stop. So just how did this happen? Well, a comet, that was passing Earth, turned him into a human man appropriately named Bronco Bill. And if the name isn't selling you, he also became a rodeo star. I guess he has quite the experience in the field, literally speaking as well. Supergirl and rodeo star Bronco Bill fell in love and dated for some time until he, you know, turned back into an animal. At that point, they called it off. Look, I have so many questions, I'm just afraid to ask them.
Number 6. Tony Stark and Emma Frost. A lot of people have been confused about the potential future wedding that was made mention of in History of the Marvel Universe issue 6 between Tony Stark and Emma Frost. Or maybe you're not confused because maybe you didn't know about this, but this is a thing. This seems like one of the most random mashups to happen in comics, within the same universe at least. And yet some are speculating it could just be a marriage in name alone, and more about a strong business partnership cemented through marriage. However, did you know that Tony and Emma actually have a romantic history? You might have missed the brief mentioning of it, but back in the 2006 Civil War in issue number 3, it was alluded to that Tony and Emma have potentially been sleeping together on and off for years, when neither of them were otherwise attached. As weird as these two together sounds, I mean, it does kind of make sense. Both are powerful people with an appreciation for the finer things, and who are both masters when it comes to business dealings. So they might have more in common than you think. And if you're wondering, yes, Scott does know about it apparently.
Number 5. Lois and Super Baby. Okay, being turned into a baby can be fun, definitely. In issue 147 of Batman, Bruce Wayne became a baby for a little and Robin didn't, so it was a good time. It was fun. The dynamic was funny. Just a little Batman using balloons to gain height. It's great. But sometimes it can get a little weird. For example, in Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane issue 59, we see more of this babyverse come to life, and it's kind of serious and totally creepy. It starts out with Super Baby getting spanked, which is quite the intro. Well, in this comic, Super Baby is from an alternate reality, and Superman is still a thing. He's still his own unit. So Lois brings home the baby version, and Super Baby starts ripping photos apart, just being a pain in the ass. It's the 60s we're talking about, so Lois spanks him a lot. She's like rolling her wrist out in between. I mean, he's the baby of steel, so it's gotta hurt a little bit. Things get even more weird than all of this when you realize the story is just about Lana and Lois fighting over who gets to marry the older Super Baby. This is one I hope I forget, but now you have to live with it as well.
Number 4, Jimmy Olsen and Mrs. Giz Piddle-Sinners. Jimmy has really weird and random luck with women. Sometimes he gets the most charming ladies and other times the most troublesome ones. Remember that time Harley Quinn pretended to be a love columnist who was interested in him because she actually wanted to kill him? That happened. He's had all sorts of superpowered and alien girlfriends over the years, but one of the weirdest instances of romance for Jimmy happened in issue 100 of Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. During an issue where we saw him married, or almost married, to Lucy Lane, Lois's sister. In fact, the wedding ended up not happening after all Jimmy's exes showed up, who still had a thing for Jimmy, including Miss Giz Piddle-Sinners from the 5th Dimension. We'll just call her Miss Giz for short. Thank you past Amanda that wrote this. She is a trickster imp who hails from the same home as Mr. Mixie. She loved Jimmy so much, she sabotaged his marriage to Lucy, making it so that every time the pair kissed, Superman would be transformed into a mole. I'm not kidding, this also really happened. Something Jimmy later referred to as the mole effect. Wow, that's great, Jimmy. Miss Giz's undying and mischievous love for Jimmy actually succeeded in breaking up Lucy and Jimmy. Jimmy never gets any love in the end.
Number 3, Killer Croc and Orca. A fishy match made in heaven, that's for sure. I wouldn't want to double date with these two. I mean, the smell alone, I'll take the check. Let's get the hell out of here. In the Injustice Elseworld series, Killer Croc and Orca are married. Now, they must have met on Plenty of Fish or something. Now, that sounds like a pretty serious romance as it is, but in Injustice Volume 2, Issue 42, things get to the next level. Orca walks in, announces that she's pregnant, and the room goes silent. No one makes a peep. It's really, there's a dull in the air. And then Killer Croc just slowly stands up, looks around for a little, and then tells the gang that he should probably head out now. He's not too pumped at the moment, but we definitely were.
Number 2, Rogue and the Sentry. This is a weird one that just randomly was retconned into existence. But what do you expect with the Sentry, one of the original heroes who himself was retconned into existence? During Sentry's funeral in Sentry Fallen Sun, after the death of both him and his wife Lindy, we see all the heroes gather to pay their respects. They all share their feelings and memories of Bob over a few beers, and a water for Tony because, as Sentry taught him, he always has a choice. While reminiscing, Rogue reveals that Sentry was the only person who could touch her, though I'm pretty sure Magneto can kinda do that too, at least in some realities. Anyways, because Sentry was the only person who could touch her, they ended up having a deeply emotional and physical relationship. We don't really know what Lindy thought of this, or when exactly their relationship happened, or how that all works. This is all we get before Rogue runs off in tears, and I don't think it's ever really mentioned again, so that's kinda weird.
And number 1, Harley Quinn and Harley Quinn. Do you think if you met another version of yourself, you would like them? Would you fall in love? I had this conversation with my friend after watching Loki recently. I could date myself maybe for a week, and then I would go through my phone and be like, who's this guy? And I'm like, you tell me, bro. But when Harley Quinn met herself back in 2016's Harley's Little Black Book, she fell in love. It was great. From Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti, we get to see 6 issues where Harley teams up with other big names, like Superman, Lobo, but then things get unique when Harley meets herself in one of these fun alternate universes, and it's great. They love each other, it's a ride. This whole issue was a good time, but it just honestly made me think if I could date myself. Amanda, could you date a clone of yourself?
I would date me. I would date a variant of me. So either like male, female me, but like, you know, has to be a little different.
Yeah, definitely. Chris, what about you? So quick, he's like, yep, absolutely.
Yeah, we're both like, yes, we would totally do it.
I would do it. The same clone, same height too. We could dance together. Oh, it'd be great. The curls, we get lost in each other's curls. It's beautiful.
Number 10. Human Torch and Victorious. Definitely one of the most awkward moments to have happened in recent comics, I think. During Fantastic Four issue 33 at Doom's wedding to the Latvian hero Victorious, it's revealed that she actually slept with one of his enemies. Yep, you guessed it, Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm. Well, this is the kind of behavior we've come to kind of expect from Johnny Storm. We wouldn't expect it to have messed up everything as badly as it did, or we wouldn't have expected it on this level, I guess. The truth initially was kept a secret, but finally, up at the altar, Victorious realized her mistake in keeping it from her husband-to-be, Victor, and decided that he actually should know. Yikes, I would not have wanted to be one of the wedding guests. Ugh, would have been rough. I mean, it was rough. It became a mess really quick. Number 9. Superman and Cheetah. I know what you're probably thinking. When did this even happen? Well, it took place in a series that explores Superman's time on Earth when he was young and wild in his early 20s, before he settled into his job at the Daily Planet and ended up in love with Lois Lane. In issue number 3 of Superman American Alien, we learned that a young Clark Kent one time ended up on a yacht where Bruce Wayne's birthday was being celebrated. Of course, this was all a ruse for Bruce, who as a youngster traveled the world learning and honing his skills as a combatant and detective, so he wasn't actually there for his birthday. In fact, he wasn't actually there for pretty much any of his birthdays. As such, Clark ends up meeting a young Barbara Minerva while on the yacht. Barbara knows it's not Bruce, but still decides to have a little fun time with this mysterious stranger, and the two end up sleeping together. Barbara even encourages Clark to embrace people mistaking him for the absent Bruce, and, you know, just have a fun time. Which in the end, he does. If this strange romance bothers you, however, don't worry. It's all in good fun, as American Alien is not considered a part of the main continuity. When I found out this happened, I was like, what? But it's not part of the main continuity. It's not within the main canon. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more awkward romances, well boy, do I have some more stories to tell ya. So be sure to let us know you want that list by giving this video a thumbs up. Maybe next time we'll talk about some awkward villain romances. There's some of those too. Number 8. Stargirl and Shazam. Stargirl and Shazam's relationship wasn't really awkward from their own perspective. The two heroes were both teenagers at the time, and Stargirl was aware that Shazam was really teenager Billy Batson. But it got really awkward when other heroes who didn't know of Shazam's true identity and age caught wind that the two were together. It became so awkward, in fact, that Shazam decided to break up with Courtney. Billy knew he couldn't make everyone understand without revealing his true identity, and so for that reason their relationship basically had to end. Which, yeah, that would be pretty awkward because Shazam definitely looks like an adult, so yikes, not good. Number 7. Storm and Doom. Oh man, if ever there was an awkward romance, this is definitely one of them. Although that so often is what happens when we have romances, or rather flirtations, between heroes and villains. Recently in Sword issue number 7, we saw a callback to the history between Storm and Doom. They once had a sort of impromptu date. That date, however, did not end too well, and she was trapped inside a body-tight chrome casing, aggravating her intense claustrophobia. Storm would escape this chrome prison shortly, and later would go on to heal from her claustrophobia over the coming years, but she wouldn't forget the slight that Doom had made against her. While initially she thought Doom a gentleman back then, today she is wiser. We see the topic come up again recently when Victor attempts to flirt with Aurora during a diplomatic dinner between the two, with Storm being the queen of Mars / Morocco and Doom being the ruler of Latveria. Storm quickly reminds Doom that she has not forgotten their past, to which he hastily apologizes and claims that her imprisonment was due to a malfunctioning Doombot who had acted on his behalf that evening years ago. I don't know, Doom. I don't think I'm buying it. Number 6. Starfire and Jason Todd. Starfire and Jason Todd are a weird couple for, well, a number of reasons. Fortunately, they never really went full couple and really only had an implied relationship / flirtation during their time together on the Outlaws team. Still, this pairing was super awkward considering that Starfire had no recollection of her time with Dick Grayson, but also was implied to be younger in the New 52 continuity, with her being associated with the Teen Titans. Jason is, I believe, only a few years younger than Nightwing, which also makes everything kind of weird between Jason, Nightwing, and Starfire, because it's kind of also perhaps unintentionally implied that she would be a lot younger than both of them, and yet even in this continuity I believe she and Dick were still almost married. that still happened, I think. There's also the whole thing between Starfire just seemingly being interested in sleeping with Jason, and then pretty much immediately after actually sleeping with Roy Harper, aka Arsenal. Number 5. Archangel and Tuesday Bird. I don't know if you have read the Archangel one-shot Phantom Wings, but if you haven't, you need to go do so. It is a treat. If you like weird things, you should read it. In this comic, Archangel ends up trapped in what appears to be some kind of pocket or nightmare dimension. In reality, it's being created and manipulated by a mutant who we learn is named Tuesday Bird. No, I'm not kidding, that's her name. Tuesday seems to possess the power to manipulate birds, and we learn that the trauma she suffered is actually causing them to repeatedly attack her. In the end, Warren and Tuesday end up with a weird attraction to one another, where Tuesday simultaneously finds him both beautiful and disgusting due to him looking like a bird because he's got wings, you know? And Warren wrestles with his own issues regarding losing his wings, his transformance into Archangel, and his feelings about his new techno-organic wings. At night, she secretly anoints his wings with oil while he sleeps. It's very weird, it's very creepy, it's very sensual. I don't want to spoil it for those who want to go back and revisit this one, but I'll just say it ends on an even weirder note, if you can even imagine that. Number 4. The Wasp and Havoc. That's right, at one point two of the most complex Marvel family trees were intertwined via Janet Van Dyne and Alex Summers' relationship. These two got together during their shared time on the Avengers Unity Squad. Although they might seem like an unlikely couple, both of these two have some shared experiences in the sense that they both had some weird and awful relationships. So seeing them together kind of gave me hope that they could find something less weird and maybe more healthy together. Their relationship even resulted in the birth of Katie Summers, their daughter. Ready for the awkward part? Well, Kang ends up resetting the timeline to save the universe, which means that their time together and the birth of Katie basically gets wiped mostly clean, meaning Katie now never existed, although sadly both Janet and Alex do remember her existence. And Janet and Alex would also end up breaking up following Axis when Havoc ended up coincidentally shielded and therefore remained evil. Boo! Justice for Katie. Justice for this relationship. I love that Alex is like, it doesn't matter now because I'm evil, so I don't care that we were in a relationship. Because that's what evil people are like. Number 3. Wallace West and Raven. Wallace West and Raven have to be one of the weirdest couples we got out of the New 52. Why? Well, because Wally West II was considered to be much younger than Raven. Some weird stuff went down when we got the New 52, as this was meant to be a complete reset of the continuity. At least, that was kind of the idea. In reality, the New 52 was more like a reshuffling of the continuity, with some things staying the same and others changing, which really only made everything more confusing and awkward for readers. One such bizarre change involved the Teen Titans. We got a fresh new Teen Titans, mostly, except some people aged up in New 52, joining just the Titans team, while others seemed to remain eternally young, staying with the Teen Titans. One such member who got left behind was Raven. She was part of the Teen Titans team, despite her being an original member in the New Earth continuity of the Teen Titans, so she should have been older. This confused people. She ended up in a relationship with Wally, which seemed pretty controversial considering that Raven should in theory be much older than Wallace West. This was a fresh continuity, but it was really hard for people to forget the past, like back when Raven actually almost ended up dating the original Wally West, Wallace's older cousin. Wally seems to be implied to be at least a decade older than Wallace West II. Then add in the fact that Raven has played the role of mentor and Wallace has played the role of student, and yeah, it gets really weird. Number 2. Husk and Angel. I've talked about this one a few times and it doesn't get any less awkward the more that I do. In fact, I feel like every time we come back to it, it only gets more awkward for me. Husk is Paige Guthrie, the younger sibling of Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, and one of the siblings, I should say, as there are many Guthries out there. While Sam was introduced to us in the comics in 1982, Paige wouldn't appear until a couple years later, showing up in 1984. Angel, however, was first introduced in issue number 1 of the X-Men in 1963. Where he's initially implied to be of college age, but then of course it was later retconned that the original X-Men were teenagers when they joined up, more like high school age. Still, if Angel was around in the 60s as a teen, and Paige was introduced in the 80s as a teen, I think you see where I'm going with this. Initially, Paige dated Chamber for a while, but later she ended up as Angel's rebound following his breakup with Betsy. While also being seemingly much older than Paige, Warren would also sometimes treat her like she was a kid, and not really like his equal, which also made things even more awkward for readers. Also, there's the time that they were flying in the sky and some things happen. That was awkward. In front of Husk's mom too, which is also awkward. Number 1. Batwoman and Nocturna. Batwoman and Nocturna got together following Kate Kane's breakup with her then fiancée Maggie Sawyer. In fact, Nocturna in the comics was the one who caused that breakup. Behind the scenes of the narrative, there was a lot more going on though, with Batwoman's marriage to her fiancé being basically called off by DC, who didn't want to see it happen, arguing with the creative team behind the book, who did want to see it happen. So Nocturna isn't just bad for Batwoman because she full on manipulated her into letting her feed off of her and dump Maggie and date her, but because she also represented a bigger issue that was going on at the time. The relationship wasn't only abusive to start, but was also abusive throughout. From the start, with Natalia also behaving in a very controlling manner, consistently jealous of Maggie, even after Kate had broken off that engagement. It was just a big yikes of a relationship that also highlighted more awkward and awful problems going on behind the scenes.
Number 10. Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Arguably, this relationship actually does make a ton of sense. After losing the love of his life, Cyclops is understandably incredibly heartbroken, so when the flashy new clone of his beloved ex comes waltzing on the scene, Cyclops jumps straight in without so much as a second thought as to why this is kind of wrong. Now, obviously Scott had no idea that Madeline was a clone. After Jean Grey passed away, he flew to Alaska to be with his family, and he met Madeline, who just so happened to be the pilot and also looked exactly like Jean Grey. So he immediately started dating her, not thinking twice about how this is a horrible basis for a relationship. This oversight came around to bite him in the butt in a couple of ways. First of all, Madeline was created by Mr. Sinister and placed on that flight with fake memories as a huge overarching plot to create the most powerful mutant he could in the form of Nathan Summers, which resulted in a whole whack of stuff. But then, when Jean Grey was resurrected and came back, Scott abandoned Madeline and their baby even faster than he started dating her, which eventually led to the powerful mutant making a deal with the devil and becoming the Goblin Queen and starting the Inferno arc. It worked out to make some great characters and stories, but this is part of the reason I hate Scott Summers. Good god, man. And at number 9 is Namor and Sandy. Namor the Submariner has infamously always had a thing for Susan Storm, the Invisible Woman, to the point that he is kind of annoying with it, even kidnapping her. I think his infatuation with Sue is the reason that most of his other relationships have been with women who look so much like her. Namora, Betty Dean, Emma Frost, they all have an odd resemblance to the Invisible Woman, but his relationship with Sandy Pierce may have actually been the inspiration for his love for blonde women. Namor is willing to overlook the fact that Sandy here is the daughter of an oil tycoon, responsible for deep sea oil drilling that contaminated both his beloved ocean and Atlantis directly. It's actually more likely that Sandy is his muse because they met on a beach when they were both children back in the 20s and dated years later. But we will never know more because, Sandy just kinda disappeared from Marvel Comics without a trace. There was never a breakup for these two in the comics, never a goodbye, just one day Sandy stopped appearing and Namor, curiously, never mentions her ever again, leaving fans to wonder what the heck happened to her. The two met in the 20s, so some just assume she passed away from old age. Maybe he offed her, maybe it's Maybelline, maybe one day we will find out, but probably not.
Number 8. Tony Stark and Iron Man. So this one is a rather bizarre one-sided romance that took place in Iron Man Volume 3, issues 26 through 30. In this story, Tony Stark is about to celebrate New Year's Eve in 1999. So normally Tony has safeguards in place to ensure that the technology in the Iron Man suit does not become sentient and self-aware. However, because he was so busy with his crime fighting, Tony forgot to update the software in time for Y2K. He was then hit by lightning in a fight with the villain Whiplash, and his Iron Man suit became alive. It convinces him that together they could be an even better Iron Man, and mentions how Tony has trouble letting people in, referring to his inability to tell his love interest at the time, Rumiko, that he loves her. Tony angrily asks the suit what it knows about love, and the suit responds that it is in love with him. Tony tries out the living suit, but it almost immediately goes wrong, with it killing Whiplash for hurting Tony, and going into a jealous rage when Tony speaks to Rumiko and when he puts on another Iron Man suit. The suit takes Tony to a deserted island and tries to keep him prisoner, tied to a tree in his underwear, until he agrees to become one with the suit. The suit has a particularly touching monologue after it thinks it's killed Tony, yelling to the heavens, "Why couldn't you feel for me as you did, Miss Rumiko? Was that too much to ask? Is that why I did this? Did I do this for love? Tony gets free and fights the suit, who literally tears out its own heart, offers it to Tony, and then dies. Tony then holds a funeral for the suit and leaves.
Number 7. Doc Ock and Aunt May. Sometimes in Stan Lee's stories, it felt like the guy was purposely just messing with us for his own entertainment. The prime example being this weird time that they almost had Doc Ock marry Aunt May in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 130 and 131. Otto Octavius, you dastardly devil you. In the first Spider-Man annual, Doc Ock and Aunt May first meet when the villain, as part of the Sinister Six, kidnaps Aunt May and Betty Brant. The villains get their comeuppance, but for some strange reason, Aunt May takes a liking to Octavius in particular. Why? No idea. Perhaps it's the extra limbs. For some reason, these two, a kidnapper and his victim, begin to date, and then very quickly jump to marriage in number 130 and 131. Luckily for everyone involved, Hammerhead rudely interrupts the ceremony, prompting Spider-Man to come swinging into the chapel to put a stop to it all, in the issue titled My Uncle, My Enemy. Even after the marriage is called off, May has still got some hots for the octopus though, and Marvel even revisited this whole thing briefly in Amazing Spider-Man Beyond. Luckily this time May is less receptive to the advances of the charming supervillain.
Number 6. Batman and Barbara Gordon. This one is mercifully not canon to the main DC universe, but it still rubs a lot of people the wrong way. In the future set Batman Beyond series, where an older Barbara Gordon, formerly Batgirl, tells the new Batman, Terry McGinnis, that she and Bruce Wayne had a relationship at some point during the series. This was followed up on in the animated Mystery of the Batwoman film, where Bruce and Barbara are on the phone and Barbara flirts with an uncomfortable Bruce. Fans were a little weirded out as to why animated series creator Bruce Timm kept including this weird ship, but things got really icky in the Batman Beyond 2.0 comics, where it was revealed in issue 28 that while Barbara was in a relationship with Dick Grayson, she got pregnant and miscarried Bruce's baby. We were mercifully spared any more of this relationship until Bruce Timm made an animated adaptation of The Killing Joke, which featured a new plotline of Batman and Batgirl getting busy on a rooftop. It's an icky ship, both due to the age difference, the fact that she dated his son, the fact that he's essentially her teacher, and the fact that he's best friends with her dad. I'm glad this has never made its way into the main canon, but the fact that it is canon to the otherwise flawless animated series is a real shame. Number 5. Miss Marvel and Marcus. One of the most stomach-turning entries on this list is really not a romance, but for some reason is treated like one in the story. In Avengers 197, Carol Danvers discovers she's pregnant. She doesn't remember how it happened, and the baby is growing at an irregular speed. She gives birth 3 issues later in Avengers 200, and all of her teammates are weirdly excited, cooing over the child and treating Carol like she's the unreasonable one for not being excited about the mystery baby. The child, Marcus, grows up in a matter of hours and reveals that he's the son of Immortus, the ruler of Limbo. He had Marcus with a woman he had plucked out of time, but he was trapped in Limbo until he could be born on Earth. So, he brought Danvers to Limbo, romanced her with a combination of charm and, as he himself puts it, subtle manipulation from his father's machines, and impregnated Miss Marvel with his own essence so he could be born on Earth. For some bizarre reason, Carol then decides to go back to Limbo with Marcus to explore the potential of their relationship, despite the fact that A, he tricked her into bed, and B, he's her own son. This was not well received and was later retconned to be treated as the violation of Carol that it was, but it is both bizarre and disturbing that this happened in the first place.
Number 4. Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy. Just no. If you've been a fan of this channel for the past year, you have heard my opinion on this relationship many times, but it's never enough. This is gross. Makes me want to wash my eyeballs out. Seeing Norman Osborn's wrinkly old face with his stupid looking hair grinning down at the way too young Gwen Stacy makes my skin crawl. If any of you don't know what I'm talking about, I am so sorry for bringing this into your life. The passing of Gwen Stacy at the hands of the Green Goblin is one of the defining moments in Peter Parker's life, and it cemented Green Goblin as one of Peter's most ruthless foes. But then, Marvel and J. Michael Straczynski gave us the Sins Past Spider-Man story arc, and specifically Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, number 512. 2 twin assassins show up in New York on the trail of the web-slinger, and to cut to the chase, these twins were actually the secret children of Gwen Stacy and freaking Norman Osborn, from when they had an affair. And their birth was suddenly revealed as the whole reason that Norman even offed Gwen Stacy in the first place. But Adam, how are these twins around the same age as Peter? Apparently, it's because of Norman's enhanced blood, which caused them to age quicker than normal, which basically means that Marvel decided that ruining the image of Gwen Stacy and slightly devaluing her passing was worth it to create an extremely overcomplicated arc that goes nowhere and adds nothing but ickiness to the Spider-Man continuity, but it was retconned.
Number 3. Supergirl and Comet. Our next entry takes us back to the days of ancient Greece, where a centaur named Byron fell in love with a powerful sorceress. He saved her life from an evil wizard and asked to be transformed into a human as reward. The sorceress crafted a potion that would turn his horse half human, but the evil wizard switched the potion out with one of his own that did the reverse, permanently turning him into a horse. To soften the blow of this, the sorceress gave him another potion that gave him immortality as well as the powers of telepathy, flight, invulnerability, super strength, and speed. The wizard then trapped him on an asteroid where he remained until he was accidentally freed by Supergirl. Byron became obsessed with the Girl of Steel and returned to Earth to find her. She named the horse Comet, and the two worked together, with Kara thinking of him as her pet, and Comet's thought bubbles often describing the horse pining for the Girl of Steel. Anytime a particular comet passed through the solar system though, he would transform back into a normal human named Bronco Bill, who would romance Kara before turning back into a horse. Kara was unaware of her horse's double life, which is probably for the best. Anyways, here's a picture of Kara kissing a man while her horse thinks to himself, "She kissed me like that once."
Number 2. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. The Ultimate Universe has its fair share of weird relationships all of its own. Creepy Wolverine will always live in the back of my mind, but funnily enough, this romance is possibly a product of Wolverine, as in Scarlet Witch could quite possibly be his child, although that is not confirmed. What is confirmed is that his possible child and her brother have a much closer relationship than any pair of siblings ever should. Wanda and Pietro are very close in every universe. It happens when you have to survive together. In the Ultimate Universe, however, their mother was a witch and their father was an absolutely twisted and evil mutant supervillain, unless it was Wolverine, which just makes the whole thing even more hectic. No matter who the daddy is, they didn't have the greatest upbringing, with Pietro getting the real bad end of the stick, severely mistreated by his father to the point of busted kneecaps and Wolverine-shaped assassins. But in my mind, it doesn't fully justify having a full-on romantic relationship with your sister. I don't think anything ever will. Comic book fans everywhere were just kind of left going, what and why? Because while there have been hints at how close the siblings were, it wasn't until Ultimates 3 that this revelation dropped out of nowhere. While it takes place in an alternate universe, the controversy of this moment alone made it so anyone who writes these two characters together ever since has had to be super careful with how the pair are portrayed.
Number 1. Aviax and the Dinosaur. The Wanderers are a group of DC heroes from the 30th century who go on interplanetary adventures. In issue 12 of their first series, they get a call to investigate an Earth whose planet's dinosaurs are dying off at a faster rate than expected due to otherworldly gases being unleashed on them. One of the members of the team, Aviax, has the ability to turn into any bird he wants, and he discovers that the reason so many dinosaurs are dying off is because the radioactive gas features a type of radiation that they have not yet evolved to be able to survive. He comes up with a cunning plan to transform into a slightly more evolved dino bird, and then pass along his genetics to the dinosaurs so that their children can one day transform and evolve into birds. Here's the panel featuring his team's reaction when he says that he's gonna bump uglies with a dinosaur. True to his word, Aviax turns into a dino bird, finds a suitable mate, pins her down, and makes a joke about how it's time for the hard part, laughs at his own joke, and then bangs a dinosaur. It then cuts to the next day, with Aviax sneaking out on the sleeping dinosaur. It's a weird premise for a comic book, made only stranger by the fact that Aviax isn't just willing to mate with a dinosaur, he seems genuinely excited, and thinks that the rest of his team have gone crazy when he returns to the ship the next issue because they don't want to hear all the quote juicy details. This is by far the strangest romance on this list, but after researching this entry and showing it to Adam, he decided, and I swear this is true, to order a copy of it on eBay so that it could become a valuable part of his collection.
Drama is a big part of the X-Men, and often this extends to their bizarre and wild romances. If you think Magneto and Rogue is a weird ship, wait till you hear about some of these. So this is a weird one because before Amanda Sefton was known as Amanda Sefton, she was Jermaine Zardos, the sister of Nightcrawler. Admittedly, his adopted sister, as Nightcrawler was not born into the Zardos family, but was merely taken in and raised by them. But still, Pretty weird considering where we're about to go. Even weirder, Jermaine had apparently always been in love with her brother, and when he was accused of murdering their other brother, Stefan, Jermaine refused to accept that Kurt had done so in cold blood because of her feelings for him. She sought Kurt out to find out what was really going on. In truth, Kurt had killed Stefan, but only because Stefan had at an earlier time basically made Kurt promise to do so if Stefan ever became too dangerous, so hence why he had to do it. Jermaine disguised herself as Amanda Sefton and did her best to make sure no one would recognize her, not even her brother Kurt. This plan miraculously worked, and Amanda began to investigate and also date her adopted brother. This kind of relationship has to be up there with one of the weirdest types for me in comics. What makes a relationship weird for you? Let me know in the comments. While these two never fully ended up together, Loki did consider that Storm might make a great queen to stand by his side as he ruled Asgard. He tricks her into joining his guard by giving her Stormcaster and restoring her powers, making her the new goddess of thunder, someone who can rival his brother, Thor. Storm almost fully joins Loki, but ultimately rejects him after discovering that something is amiss and that she has basically been manipulated. Yeah. In the end, she ends up joining up with her fellow X-Men to, of course, defeat Loki. Storm really doesn't like being manipulated, but then again, who does? I mean, I have to talk to you about this one. I don't have a choice really. It's just so bizarre when you just break it down in terms of what this relationship is. So let me break it down for you. Madeline Pryor is the clone of Jean Grey, created by Mr. Sinister so that he could engineer the perfect mutant offspring after Jean's apparent death. Cyclops would meet Maddie and fall in love with her because, well, she reminded him of Jean, although for some reason no one ever thought this was super suspicious or weird, that she was basically a one-for-one copy of Jean in regards to her appearance at least. Just a coincidence, they thought. Nothing to worry about, they thought. Well, it turns out it was something to worry about when Jean Grey reappeared after Scott and Maddie had their first child together and Cyclops decided to basically leave his family to just go adventuring with his fellow mutants once more. This ended up driving Maddie crazy, unlocking her true psionic potential and causing her to make a deal with demons. Yeah, she made a deal with literal demons. She would go on to have an affair with Scott's brother, Havoc, who also has had a very complicated relationship with Madeline Pryor over the years, and become an extremely dangerous and powerful supervillain. So, not your typical fairy tale ending here. This relationship comes to us from the alternate Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610. Beast and Storm dated for a while here, but their relationship was cut short by Beast dying. A strange, recurring thing in Storm's romantic life, actually. Quite a few of the people she has dated, on a multiversal scale at least, have ended up dead, oddly. So I guess watch your back if you're dating Storm, maybe. Professor X and Mystique have often been presented as foes and even sometimes allies or childhood friends in the comics. Mystique's origins are actually still quite mysterious. We know a lot about her, but we don't know exactly how old she is or even all the things she has done in her lifetime. We do know, however, that she was married to Professor X, and while under the guise of Moira McTaggart, had his son. I would be almost willing to accept this random happenstance of romance had it actually been explained in the comics, but it's really not. It's referenced in Uncanny X-Men and Battle of the Atom, where we meet Charles Xavier 2, their son, but that's pretty much it. Husk and Angel are a couple that I honestly have a lot of feelings about. The weirdest part of their relationship is that most people point to the implied age difference here. Warren is a full-on adult and one of the original X-Men members, which makes him seemingly pretty old, whereas Husk is a teenager. I think she was just 19 or 18, so I mean technically she is an adult, sure, but she's still pretty young, she's still a teenager. There's also the fact that Husk was this weird rebound for Angel where he claimed he was like, he's gonna love her forever, but it didn't really last past Chuck Austin's run and has never really come up since. When Husk and Angel got together, Angel had just gotten out of a lengthy relationship with Betsy Braddock, who was going by Psylocke at that time. It was an awkward relationship, and if you don't believe me, take a look at the time Husk and Angel made up after an argument by getting intimate in the sky right above Paige's mom and the X-Men. Yikes. Imagine looking up and seeing that. She's so weird. When Doom and Arcade kidnap some X-Men in order to force them to visit Murder World, Arcade's twisted amusement park, Dr. Doom decides to use this opportunity opportunity to have a dinner date with Storm. Honestly, can I blame him? Not really. The crazy thing is that sparks seem to be flying between these two. I mean, Dr. Doom is pretty smooth and powerful and is the well-loved leader of an entire nation, Latveria, so I kinda get it. And he is confident as heck, which seems to honestly be a thing that Storm is often attracted to in the comics. However, this romance quickly comes to an end after Doom makes it known that he is also, willing to kill Aurora if necessary. Nothing will spoil the mood like that revelation. He incites her wrath after he encases her in chrome to create a Storm statue and to spare her the ravages of age. Literally a quote from the comic. Excuse me, Victor? What? Juggernaut isn't a mutant and is usually more often thought of as an X-Men villain, sure, but he has also teamed up with the X-Men in the past, even sometimes seeing eye to eye with his stepbrother Charles Xavier, though usually that's not the case between the two siblings, historically. She-Hulk, however, is not a mutant or an X-Men, but she is an acclaimed hero, which is one of the things that makes this relationship, honestly kinda weird. Well, that and the fact that it was a super random hookup. It all went down in Uncanny X-Men issue number 435 when She-Hulk was representing Juggernaut. This ship was considered so abhorrent that years later She-Hulk denied that it ever happened. Yeah. In the 2005 She-Hulk series in issue number 21, it was actually retconned that the version of She-Hulk who had done the deed with Kane had actually been an alternate version of her character from Earth 721, who had been on vacation on Earth 616 and was impersonating her 616 counterpart. So we wrote it out of the continuity, but there's still that page if you want to look at it. If you thought Paige and Warren were weird, I have one that's somehow even a bit weirder. I know. Stacy X is a mutant who can affect the way you feel, making you feel nauseous, dizzy, or even really good using pheromones. She worked for a time at a house of pleasure, using her mutant powers to, well, please people. Her work was attacked by an anti-mutant group and burnt to the ground. So Stacy X decided, reluctantly at first, to join up with the X-Men who had helped to confront the group that had targeted her workplace. She ended up developing a pretty epic crush on Angel, to the point that although she knew he was already taken, she sent him a video of her jumping rope naked. Yeah, pretty wild. Wild enough that I honestly just had to mention it here, so there you go. More of a moment in the comics than a full-blown romance, but still, these two together were a weird time, especially considering that Gambit is often seen as the true love of Rogue, and Mystique is, of course, Rogue's mother. Already we got a super weird scene where a mutant student of Gambit's known as Fox approaches him in the showers, attempting to seduce him. Gambit manages, though it seems honestly just barely, to resist her charms, and this is already awkward enough as this is, a student-teacher relationship, so yeah, it's really weird. But it's made even weirder when we then learn that Mystique had actually infiltrated the Xavier school under the guise of, you guessed it, Fox. Mystique later claims to have done this in an attempt to protect her daughter against Gambit, whom she basically didn't think was good enough. But I gotta be honest, trying to seduce your daughter's partner to prove that he's not good enough seems like a really weird attempt at protecting her. No wonder Rogue is always getting mad at her adoptive mama Mystique for meddling. Like, I'd be like, what is even going through your mind right now, Mystique? I need you to just stop. It's a lot.
Superhero couples are a hot topic. Some are super soulmates and others, well, not every love story should be told. To the surprise of MCU fans, Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch once had a thing going. In the movies, it's hard to imagine Wanda being with anyone other than Vision, but the comics are a very different story, literally. Before Wanda got serious with Vision, she was getting a little flirty with Clint. It didn't last super long though, because Wanda realized that her heart really lies with Vision and put an end to the situationship. Some interesting tidbits to note about this pair. During Wanda's mental break that led to M-Day, she took out a few Avengers on the way too, one being Hawkeye, so she has taken him out in both senses of the word. Then she brought him back to life later during House of M. Many years after that, the pair met up again and shared a moment together. It was a bit odd though, because this was when Wanda had been resurrected and living in a small village, recovering with little to no memory of her past. Even with that hurdle, the moment shared between the pair brought a sense of closure to the relationship. It took decades to resolve the love story, but Beast and Dazzler were worth the wait. The Beauty and the Beast of the 1980s, Dazzler and Beast first met in Hollywood. Dazzler was a performer, down on her luck, and Beast was on vacation with big dreams of being on the big screen. At this point, the world isn't super fond of having mutant celebrities. That's why Dazzler is having such a hard time breaking into Hollywood. When she is promised promised the chance to perform for Hollywood's elite, she takes it. However, the performance is less singing and more of a gladiator fight. Beast and Dazzler are involved at this point and lead a revolt together, breaking up the under-Hollywood fighting ring. Their 80s romance was limited to the 4 comics in the Beauty and the Beast line, and the pair did break it off in the end. Dazzler got her own comic series, and in the last panel of the last issue, Beast made an appearance to ask Dazzler to join his new team of X-Men. We get no answer on that, just a 20-year cliffhanger that is finally resolved by Dazzler superfan writer John McCann. His story in Marvel's Heartbreakers Volume 1 involved the sweet meeting between the former lovers, where Dazzler finally answers Beast's question. She did not want to join his team. We kinda knew that already, but the events of Dazzler 42, her last issue, and Heartbreakers 1 happened close together, so Beast didn't have to wait that long. Dazzler found her happily ever after with another mutant, Longshot. Before the Flash found Iris West, he was quite the charmer, even getting involved with teammate Zatanna. Early on in the Bronze Age of DC, the fastest man around and the most powerful magic user had a bit of a flirtation going. In Justice League of America 187, they even shared a romantic dinner and night together. Pair met in Flash 198. Zatanna kissed Barry as part of her act. She shows she's interested in him in Justice League of America 102, but it doesn't go anywhere because he was married to Iris at that point. Then they are implied to actually get together in 187 because Iris isn't in the picture anymore. Eventually though, Zatanna would suggest that the two should remain friends, and that was the end of that. Until 2023's Harley Quinn, A Very Problematic Valentine's Day Special, the couple are briefly featured in a shot together. Doc Ock once proposed to Aunt May so he could inherit a nuclear plant. Truly? What is going on? Aunt May became Doc Ock's housekeeper, and they had a professional relationship. That was all it ever was going to be, but then Octavius found out that Aunt May was set to inherit an island in the mystical land that is Canada, and that island was rich in uranium and had one of the world's most sophisticated nuclear breeding reactors. That's every villain's evil lair dream. All that stands between the Doc and that is marriage. Easy hurdle to jump. The wedding got as far as the couple getting to the altar before Hammerhead interrupted and attempted to kidnap Aunt May. He knew that Aunt May was inheriting something big, he just didn't know what it was, but he did know he wanted whatever it was. This is the most dramatic wedding of the year. May, Ock, Hammerhead, and Spider-Man, of course, they fly off to this Canadian island. Peter rescues Aunt May and the two get off the island. Doc Ock ends up in the power plant next to the fragile reactor. Hammerhead comes charging in and runs right into the reactor, making it explode and destroying the island. I am absolutely baffled, and I cannot believe this story exists, and if you don't believe me, check out Amazing Spider-Man 130 and 131. Deadpool has had a string of peculiar and extraterrestrial romances. Take his accidental marriage to alien Orxa. She was originally married to this other guy, but Deadpool took him out. When she found that out, she got super upset and tried to attack him. Deadpool figured the best way to calm her down was a kiss, and somehow he was right, and it was also then a marriage proposal. So Deadpool went to space on a mission and came out as a married man. The marriage was honestly quite good. They seemed to get along, but Deadpool couldn't stay there forever, so the pair got divorced. But the only way to get a divorce in the alien culture was to end the other partner, so Deadpool had to die to make the divorce final, but lucky for them, that is his specialty and not a problem. Orxa went on to remarry and I think has lived happily ever after. Captain Marvel and Spider-Man had a short-lived romance once upon a time. Sparks first flew in Miss Marvel 34. Carol Danvers was on a mission in New York and it attracted the attention of Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man revealed he was attracted to her when he requested a date. The pair ended up going to a fancy restaurant in issue 47 and it was awful. It looked so awkward. The date does get interrupted by people breaking in through the window. Carol quickly suits up while Peter enjoys his meal. She takes care of business. After the fight, she picks Peter up and they fly away from the restaurant in search of some good chili dogs, finally bonding over their love for food. Sharing their chili dogs on a rooftop, they have a nice ending to a disaster date. In a later meeting where Venom is involved, he tells Peter he felt Carol's feelings towards him, though nothing has come of that yet. When Spider-Man meets Miss Marvel for the first time, the first thing she asks him is if he really dated Carol Danvers. A short-lived couple, but they had a long-term impact. When you think you've seen it all, Marvel throws a human-tiger hybrid toddler at you, and we're just supposed to accept that. Hank Pym, like most characters in the Marvel Universe, was once impersonated by a Skrull. That Skrull, Hank, got to know Tigra on a very personal level, and the pair ended up creating an offspring together. The tiger toddler is still Hank's biological son though, because the Skrull replaced his genetics with Hank's, so even though real Hank had nothing to do with this, he had has a little tiger running around. As it turns out though, little William Grant Nelson just looks like a tiger. He has few cat genes and is mostly human. William has spent most of his time with the cat people for safety reasons, as Norman Osborn wanted to experiment on him because of course it would be strange if this didn't get weirder. A young Superman and Lois Lane and also Lana Lang ended up in truly one of the strangest, twisted, romantic in nature storylines I have ever had the displeasure of witnessing. It happened in the 60s when it seems anything goes. The weird romance was featured in Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane 57. So this alternate dimension Spider-Man gets de-aged and sent to the normal Spider-Man's universe. Because he is a child, he goes to find the people he knows, which are Lois and Lana, but Lois and Lana think it's their Superman de-aged and they are both romantically interested in their Superman, so throughout the comic they keep trying to win the young Super's attention in the hope that when he gets re-aged he will choose them over the other woman. It's the kind of thing that would never fly in the year of our Lord 2024. At the end of the comic is when we find out that the Superman the girls know was never actually de-aged, and he explained what happened and helps re-age and send the other Superman back to his dimension. The comic ends with the other universe Superman marrying the other universe Lois and Lana. What if I told you Doctor Strange's girlfriend Clea was intimate with US founding father Benjamin Franklin in the 1970s? Because that happened. Sometimes you hear things about the Marvel universe that are weird, but they make sense for Marvel. This isn't one of those times. It happened in Doctor Strange 18. Him and his girlfriend Clea were traveling through time and ended up on the same boat as Ben Franklin. Doctor Strange is off dealing with an otherworldly threat, and while that is happening, Ben and Clea are getting to know each other better. That was the original intention. Marvel's editorial staff had a problem with this, can't imagine why, and they changed it to Ben Franklin was actually an evil sorcerer posing as Ben Franklin that enchanted her. In the Deadpool Dead Presidents comic, Ben Franklin's ghost is there, and Doctor Strange makes a comment to him that he still hasn't forgiven him for the 70s. I don't know how to feel. Supergirl once dated her horse. I don't know what to say. Again, it was the 60s and DC was doing whatever they wanted. If it makes you feel any better, it was a Princess and the Frog kind of situation, so she wasn't actually interested in her horse, but the man that turned into her horse. It all started in ancient Greece because of course it did. A centaur named Byron saved the witch Circe and she offered to grant him a wish. Basically, he wanted to be human. She accidentally gave him the vial to turn him into a horse though. Womp womp. He ends up becoming Supergirl's horse, eventually Comet. And then this alien prince casts a spell on him where anytime a comet is nearby, Comet the horse will turn into Byron the man. He is a cute man, so Supergirl falls in love with him when she sees him, but he doesn't tell her he's her horse because he thinks he needs to keep his identity a secret because it could help him in some super tasks someday. I genuinely cannot think of a single thing that identity thing could help with, but what do I know? There's an entire other storyline with Comet going back in time to ancient Greece to get permanently changed into a man in the 1960s, and then he actually does date Supergirl, and then there's this entire story about him becoming an outlaw. The Horseman is retconned out of continuity by Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that is the best thing to come out of that situation. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and make your mark on the comment section down below. Let me know your favorite super couple. Mine is Barbara Gordon and Dick Grayson, specifically from Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero. And with that, this is Juliana signing off. Bye!